certainly know a lot of stories about companies that have imploded from great partnerships and other partnerships that have been stellar and really help the companies succeed, make the companies succeed. So we've got Earth Grousbeck here to help guide us through that conversation and varying models. Peter, I'm not going to ask what happened to that chair.
I think the definition of entrepreneurship.
But we have another team of first-string players. Those of you from the business school certainly know Irv. He's been teaching here since, some without my notes, 85. And was one of the co-founders of Continental Cable Visions in the infancy of cable in Ohio, which was Irv led the company through rapid growth and subsequent acquisitions. So we're real pleased to have him here, and thank you to all you guys for being here.
Thanks, Linda. Welcome again, everybody. Welcome back. We're getting started roughly on time and hope to move through the first half of the panel's time with comments from the panelists, and then have 20 to 25 minutes or so of time for you to ask questions and interact with the panel. Mac's going to start and talk a little bit about his decision to go solo without a partner, what he misses, and related issues. Jenny's going to talk to us about what makes a strong partnership and how does she think about the relationship with her partner. Peter started out with a partner who left shortly after they got going, and he's been very successful as a solo operator, and we'll have comments around that set of issues. And Brian will talk a little bit about what makes his partnership work and how the operating duties are divided. So let's dive right in. Mac, thanks.
Great. So I'm a solo entrepreneur, and the irony is I'm going to, in the end, recommend that if you can find a perfect partner to be in a 50-50 partnership, I actually think that might be the best model if you can find the right person. But in my particular case, I was a student here at Stanford. Halfway through, I decided I wanted to start a business. And I really was set on trying to find the dream partner, and if I couldn't find the dream partner, going it alone. And so, there's 375 people in my class, and I identified a grand total of 3 people that I felt comfortable being partners with, and certainly many of you are alums here. There's lots of great people, and so I was probably a little picky. But in the case of those 3 people, they were really people that I felt that I would be super compatible with, that we would add value to each other, that we would play off each other well, and that I could absolutely trust, and just had gotten to know them over my time at Stanford. And in the cases of those 3 people, they all didn't work out for various reasons. So one person, by the time I realized they'd be a great partner, had already partnered with someone else, and the other 2 people, different things came up, and it made more sense for them to pursue other interests. And so I decided to go it alone as an entrepreneur. I felt comfortable making that decision because at that point I had already been running my family's business for the past 5 years, and so I was a CEO. I was familiar with some of what I was getting into. I had taken over a business. I wasn't starting one, but I felt comfortable being in that position to make decisions and not have someone right there. I never seriously considered anything besides a 50-50 partnership or going it alone. I could imagine scenarios that might work, but I'm personally a big fan of having either a perfect balance or not having a tension between a minority partner. I think the big things that you miss out if you do go it alone are twofold. The first one is I just think it's really important to have thought partners. And what I had learned in my family's business was you can have a thought partner without them necessarily being a 50-50 ownership partner and principal in the business. In my family's business, I took it over at the age of 25 because my father passed away. I was working full-time at McKinsey. I did it evenings and weekends. So my thought partner in that business was our general manager, who was there on the ground every day. And I worked with him in the end for 7 years, and he was just a really great thought partner, even though he reported to me. And that sort of became the structure that I used in Balsam Brands, or Balsam Hill, the company that I started after Stanford. The other, and so just to touch on that, I ended up hiring a classmate to become the COO of my current company. And so while it's not a 50-50 partnership, they're very invested in the business. And I feel like a lot of the benefits of having a partner, someone that really cares about the business and is invested in its success, I still get that through this relationship that I have, even though, again, we're not 2 principals in the business. The other big thing that I think I missed was, especially in the early goings of the company, was someone to share the ups and the downs with. And I've forgotten the downs. I only remembered the ups. I know there were lots of both. But it's just little things, right? Like I was able to ping my friends and ask for advice, and so I was able to kind of get some of that thought partnership early on from friends. But when you have some of the sort of little victories that are going on, it's great to celebrate those. And when you have some of the little defeats or challenges, it's great to have someone to talk to about those. And, I don't want to email all my friends while they're working in their full-time job and be like, hey, I found the perfect call center for my business today. I'm so excited. Like, they don't want to get that, right, when they're in their job. And, Twitter didn't exist then, and I don't really use Facebook, and so maybe that's the Facebook status update, or maybe you tweet it now. So maybe that problem's been solved. I don't know, because I don't use either of those two things. But I really felt like those two pieces are what I missed the most going it by myself. Irv asked me to speak about a great question that I honestly don't have an answer to, and he asked me, what do I feel might have been different? Would we have grown more quickly? Would we have been more profitable if we had a partner, if I had a partner? And I think the honest answer to that question is, I don't know, because I feel like of the things that were in my vision, when I look back, we were fortunate to grow very fast, and this was a particular exception, but in the first 4 months we got to our $3 million of revenue. So we grew very quickly at the beginning. We have gotten to a point where we've become profitable, and looking back, I don't know if having someone who was a principal in the business would have helped make different decisions that would have led us to a dramatically different spot. Because again, we're 10 full-time people and 5 MBAs, 4 Stanford MBAs, so we have a really strong team. That being said, maybe we might have missed something. Maybe I missed something because my vision is so focused that if I did have a partner, we would have caught something. The last thing I'll touch on is the next entrepreneurial venture I start. Will I go it alone again? Will I partner with someone else? Again, I think my dream would be to partner with someone, because I just think there's a lot of magic when you have someone that you work really well together with, that you can be a partner with. I think I'm comfortable doing it again the same way, where I have someone who is the thought partner, and maybe I learn to use Twitter and get the kind of sharing the ups and the downs. But I think I don't have to be as picky as I was 5 years ago. As an example, Brian and I are classmates, and I didn't know Brian super well back then. But
I was wondering why I didn't make that 3.
Yeah, exactly. Playing intramurals isn't enough to figure it out. But we've actually gotten to know each other quite a bit in the last 5 years, and I think we'd be great partners. Brian's probably over there like, oh gosh, I hope he never asked me. But I think there's lots of people that I could partner successfully with, and I think that would be really special. But again, I wouldn't hesitate to go it alone again. And so, again, my recommendation is if you can find that perfect person, go for it. And if you can't, don't be hesitant to go it alone. If you feel like your skill set or your comfort level isn't there to go it alone, I think you'll hear some other advice on how to find the right person. But if you do go it alone, I'd really encourage you, have people you can share the ups and the downs with, and have people who can be thought partners in your business.
That's great, Matt. Thanks. Jenny?
So my advice to Mac is stay picky, and now I'll explain why. So I have had 2 startups that I've been involved with. One of them, I had a partner. Her name was Jessica Heron. We actually started here at the GSB together, and she was a dream partner. I mean, I couldn't find a better partner than Jessica. I then had another startup venture that I'm still involved with today, where I joined 3 people, and that was not the dream partnership, and I'll explain why. And so you'll hear me refer to Jessica, and then you'll hear me refer to sort of this second group in my experiences. So the cliche that finding the right business partner is harder than finding the right spouse is a commonly used cliche for a reason. It's so ridiculously true. You will spend more time with this person than I personally have ever spent with my husband. And it's just like a good marriage. When it's right, it's so right. You can get there. It's more fun. It's easier. You probably maybe get there faster than you could have without them. I'm sorry, the other way, but you get my point. Or when it's bad, like a marriage, it's infuriating and it's stressful and it costs a whole lot of money. So my first, I'm not speaking from experience on the marriage side, but I've heard. So my first recommendation to you and to myself for my next venture is to date first. Date as much as you can. The more you've worked with this person, the more you know this person, the better chances you are to actually have a strong partnership. In the case of Jessica, she and I had the privilege to work with each other for 7 months on a project. before it became a company. That was fantastic time to learn that, yes, we could communicate effectively, that we shared perspective, that we shared values and work ethic. The good news is that happened really, it was magic. It was easy and it was natural. And the bad news is I think I took it for granted, because when Bella Pictures came my way, which is the company I'm with now, and it's all worked out 6 years later, but when that came my way, I was much more, I hadn't learned the lesson, and I was much more in a mode of selling versus buying. Bella Pictures came my way, and I fell in love with the business model, and I really liked Tom Kramer, who's ex-GSB or GSB grad, and one of the co-founders. I got into sell mode. I wanted to be a part of the team. Tom interviewed me, he checked my references, all was good, and then he informed me. I said, well, now I speak with the other two people, right? And he said, no, they're fine. Whatever works for me works for them. And I feel like an idiot, quite honestly, saying this out loud, but I was like, all right then. And I joined the company. In hindsight, of course, I should have spoken to these people. I should have flown to where they were. I should have spent time with them. But it's just not where my mind was in the sell mode. So taking the marriage analogy a little bit further, not only did I not date at all, but I instantly got pregnant, because I joined the company and I raised the Series A. I reached out to my network and raised that round of financing. When that closed, I then realized how incompatible I was with these other founders, but I wasn't going to leave. I brought my investors in, so I was somewhat stuck. Like I said, it all worked out in the end, but it was pretty stressful for me, and I think it did cost the company focus and money. So my recommendation, first and foremost, is do your homework, do your due diligence. So when you are doing that due diligence, the question is, okay, so then what? What do you look for? How do you find the magic? And so I sort of clumped this into 4 areas. The first area is just horsepower and what I call entrepreneurship DNA. Do they have what it takes or what you need them to do? And are they capable of doing amazing things? Also, in the entrepreneurship DNA, are they relentless? Can they handle rejection? Do they have the stamina? Because it takes a whole lot of work to start from nothing and create a very successful company. The second area is what I call sort of the softer side of the relationship, and that is the personality, the mode of communication, the values and perspective. And for this one, I think there's not a right and a wrong. It's just like a spouse. It's chemistry. And so I'll give you, I think the best way to find the person that is going to be your dream partner is to really understand who you are and what you need to be effective. So my example with me is that I don't thrive in a sensitive organization. I'm incredibly direct. And I don't look for confrontation, but I'm not afraid of confrontation. I prefer to sort of work out the issues and move on. And that worked really well with Jessica. She and I could give it and take it and get to a higher place. With my Bella founders, that did not make me particularly popular. And my voice was often sort of not heard because I was seen as somewhat of a brute. So my voice wasn't heard, which made me less effective. I had to change my style so that it could be heard, which ultimately didn't work for me. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it sort of watered down, I think, the effectiveness of what a partnership can do. So the other thing is a shared vision on what you want your company to be when it grows up. So I think you really need to understand, is this a lifestyle company, or are you guys going to work 24/7 and really try to make it as big as fast as possible, or maybe likely somewhere in between? For me, I have 3 young kids and a husband who works a lot. When I joined Bella, I was very clear, and before I joined Bella, on making sure that they had respect for that balance. So really working those issues out ahead of time, I think, is important. Also, shared vision on control. Are you going to hold on to control no matter what? Are you open if the right opportunity presents itself to letting go of that control? What if an offer came early? How would you all react to that? And those are the kind of hypothetical questions you can have while you're dating. And then on the last one, I really want to discuss the area of compatible skill sets, because I think compatible skill sets are a lovely thing to have. And in an ideal world, in your dream partner, you have it. But I think more important than compatible skill sets are compatible strengths and weaknesses and sort of a compatible perspective. So in my 2 experiences, on paper, Jessica and I looked very similar. We both had a few years of product marketing and general marketing experience. Neither one of us were technical, and neither one of us had retail experience, and our whole business relied on working with retailers. That turned out to not be an issue because she and I had very compatible strengths and weaknesses, and we were very willing and open to playing to those strengths and weaknesses and sort of reaching a higher place with the partnership. On the other hand, on the flip side at Bella, we had beautiful compatible skill sets. You had a photojournalist, Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist, a guy great at operations. Tom Kramer is an amazing business generalist and creative marketer, and I could raise the capital and manage sales and business development organizations. So it looked beautiful, and it truly was, except for the fact that because we didn't have the other things in place, it didn't really get us to the higher place that it could have. So it's a nice to have, but I don't personally feel like it's a make or a break.
Thank you, Jenny. That's great. Peter?
Wow, I didn't realize partnerships could be quite so described in such exciting terms.
Full color.
Full color. I loved your dating analogy, though, because I think that there are so many similarities between a relationship with your wife or husband and your partnership. They're not the same, but there are a lot of similarities, and there are good things that really resonated with me. When I thought about having a partner, I didn't go through it in such a logical way. I may have benefited from that, but I did think about it as I look back in some ways that were compatible. So I was at the business school and wanted to do a search fund sort of early in the search fund cycle. I think we were the fourth search fund, and I just always wanted to do it with a partner. I thought about it. I remember talking to Kirk and Jamie, some guys who'd done it before, about it, and that's just how I wanted to do it. I thought the highs would be higher, the lows would be higher, and we were just much more likely to be successful if I did it with somebody. And I was insecure about some of my skills at the time, particularly, so it just made sense to me. So as I set out to do it, I thought of the people whom I really wanted to do it with, and that I was excited to be around, and who I really respected and was willing. The way I thought about it at the time was, who could I fight with and the next day still respect so much that I would be happy to get past the disagreement and move on to the next challenge in the business. And I think that respect analogy is a good one, and one I try and use continuing, and that who could you really disagree with and maybe have a difficult conflict with, but still want to hear their opinion and still have that opinion really resonate with you. I picked a partner. We did a search. We raised money quickly. We bought a company in almost 3 years, so it took us a long time. We took over the company. The company struggled some. His area of the company didn't thrive the way we wanted it to, and he ended up leaving the company and moving on to management consulting and other successes in his life, but leaving the company and the partnership. And I thought about recently sort of how we might have avoided some of that. What could we have done ahead of time? And it would have been hard. I was happy to have him as a partner through a lot of the process. I was frankly happy to not have a partner later in the process because I could just make changes and do things faster, and I was ultimately successful, so I was happy about that. I think the path to happiness is paved with accurate expectations, and that is true in partnerships. And so we did have a lot of expectations that were the same. So we did carefully go through a process where we talked about what did success look like, and what did failure look like, and how hard were we willing to work, and how were we going to split up responsibility once we bought a company? Who was going to be CEO, and who's going to be president or COO, and what functions would we do? And we got a lot of that on the table. We didn't talk about what would happen if one of us was not successful in a particular area of the company and how we would handle that. And I think that part of the dissolution was a result of the lack of alignment of expectations to what really happened. So we could have changed expectations. We could have tried to work on performance of that business sector as a way to avoid the partnership coming apart. Once we were in it, it was really hard to step back and fix some of those things because we were working hard. There was a lot of stress. We were trying to figure out how to solve problems, and we just didn't see some of the things the same way. And one of the things we might have done is actually taken some time to go aside and talk about what our expectations were if things went south and how we might handle that in a different way. Ultimately, he was successful in other parts of his business, I continued with the company, and we came out of a difficult time and were successful over the long run. And he benefited financially from his involvement in the company, I think, in a way that he was happy with. And so there was a lot of success that came from it, but I think it would have been better if we'd stayed together as a partnership or not had a partnership in the first time. If I did another adventure like this, I would not have a partner. I realized I was insecure about things that I didn't need to be insecure about, that there were ways I could figure out to solve those that didn't require a 50% partner. I'm not opposed to partnerships. I think it's a very personal decision. But if I went forward, I'd be happy to do it without a partner. You just make decisions faster. I just don't need a partner for that. I think I wouldn't do it without a great team. I try and build a great team and people who did many things better than I did, but I think I could do it in a way that would be great for them and great for me without having a 50% partner. 50% partnerships are complicated. No one side can solve it, can really overrule the other, and you have to figure out compromise and how to work through those. That can take time. It can lead to strength. Early on in a company, it can lead to better decisions and more work getting done because there are two of you. But it can also lead to slower decisions. And so I think I don't think there's one answer is right for the other. But for me, going forward, I would not take really consider having another partner. I guess I'm trying to think if there's someone that I respected immensely and liked and it just made sense, I would consider it, but I'd really shy away from it. I think it's just more complicated than would be necessary for me. I've got to see people do it from an investor's point of view, meaning run businesses as a partnership and run them as sort of sole CEOs. And I can't say there are more sole CEOs. I think that's easier and maybe a more reliable form by itself, but I've also seen people who have been partners for years and years and years, and I would say are maybe happier for that. I think of a couple of partnerships in particular where they're good friends, they have this bond, they've both been successful, they've made a lot of money together, they've built a great organization, and that is probably a little more rewarding doing it with somebody else. And it's probably something to consider as you think about what you want to get out of the whole thing, that it may be worth doing it. When I look at search funds now, I think the data has shown this a little bit, and I believe it, that I think that partners are somewhat more likely to be successful in a search fund context. And so I do, when I think about investing in a search fund, or thinking about advising those people on it, I do think it adds something to the whole thing. But it better be really well thought through and really well planned, or there are a lot of risks in it.
Real quick, search fund?
Pardon me for bringing up something you don't know. I'll tell you real quickly, and then I think I'll turn it over to Brian. A search fund is a process where young entrepreneurs raise money from a group in order to fund their full-time search for a company, which then they buy and run. And I think now I'll save any other comments for later and turn it over to Brian.
So I have a 50-50 partner, and I think that finding a perfect partner is almost impossible. It sounds like Jenny and Jessica might have been that kind of J&J duo, but I definitely think that when I think of my partnership, we have a very good partnership, but we worked hard at it. We did a lot of things. One of Herb's questions, why does it work well? And I narrowed it down to two reasons. The first one is we value touchy-feely, and by that I mean all the things related to communication, things related to feelings, things related to personality, and strengths and weaknesses. And to give you an example, I heard everything that they're talking about. I heard a million times when I was thinking about starting a company. Said it's just like a marriage. It's just like a marriage. It's just like a marriage. Like, well, I'm not married, so that really doesn't help me. But it sounds like I should figure that out before I partner up.
So why you're not married?
I am married now. And so I said, okay, so I have two options. I either hurry up and get married, or I do everything like I hear about that marriages do. So we did that. So we took personality tests. We met with the Catholic marriage counselor. We would look at each other. Oh yeah, definitely. We would look at each other and say, I don't think that many HBS guys do this. In San Francisco, I don't think the guy was kind of too freaked out. It was incredibly helpful in some ways because it gave us that framework to talk about those differences that sometimes we know, but we don't explicitly are able to vocalize. It gave us ways to understand why somebody was being a certain way. And I'll get to that a little bit when we talk about kind of divisions of differences in personality, but it was incredibly helpful. We've done things, the personality test that we use that I highly recommend is one called the Berkman Profile. I've done like the Myers-Briggs, and I'm sure most of you have done that, and I always feel like that one, you kind of know what the right answer is, right? It's usually, do you like to drink alone at home with your cat, or would you rather be social and go out with people for a beer? This Berkman Profile, I was like, I don't understand what they're going to get out of this question, and so it's harder to gain. I read somewhere where like Stanford MBAs are like 90% fall under two categories under Myers-Briggs. So for what it's worth, I would definitely recommend checking that out. There's things that we've done that we value around communication. So we are different, and I'll talk about that in a sec. So communication is very important. So one of the things that we use, that we actually borrowed from two fellow entrepreneurs, is called the pinch factor. And by that, I mean, when two people are interacting, there are things that can bother somebody, and lots of times there are little things that you just kind of brush off. So if I were talking to Peter, and we're talking, and he pulls out his BlackBerry and starts typing away, I feel a little pinch. But I'm probably not going to say anything, and he probably puts it away quickly, and no big deal. But the pinch is real. What we talk about is whenever there's a pinch, stop and say, pinch. Hey, Peter, I'm talking to you. It's a little distracting with your BlackBerry. 95% of the time, it's something like, sorry, Brian, but my wife's in the hospital. I'm just checking in on her. And the other 5% of the time, it's, you're right, my bad, I'm sorry. And all of a sudden, things are back on track. So those are the type of things that are very touchy-feely that a lot of East Coast MBAs may not value as much, but we found to be incredibly helpful.
Brian, you're sitting next to an HBS grad.
Sorry. The younger HBS grads.
The hole's getting deeper.
Now you're sitting next to an angry HBS.
So you're supposed to say, pinch, Brian. The second thing that I'd say that I attribute to why we get along is that we're complementary in the right places. And I stress, one thing that worth mentioning is complementary is just an MBA term to say different. So you see two parts, like, gosh, you guys are really complementary. Sounds much better than, you guys are really different. But there are some real differences. And those differences, can say, oh, they're great and in certain circumstances are going to be beneficial, and they are. There's great positives, but there are some real negatives. I am, for example, I'm the pusher. If you haven't gotten the sense with all my hand motions, I'm go, go, go. Let's go as fast as we possibly can. My business partner is more of the, let's analyze, slow it down, let's kind of whiteboard things out, and I want to go. Literally, I get into the left-hand lane about 3 yards before the exit, and he'll get in like 3 miles. When we're driving together, like he'll ask me, are you trying to stress me out? He gets, I only fill up the gas tank when the light comes on, right? When it's empty. And every time he gets in, he's like, listen, if we run out of gas, I'm not pushing. And I think there's value, right? So if there were 2 pushers, you could run the business into the ground. If there's 2 pullers, it would have never gotten the business off the ground. So that's the positive side. But there's some real negatives that having that touchy-feely side has been very helpful, and that overlap has been really strong in values. So the way we treat people and how we want to be treated is exactly the same. How we think about life and family is very similar. So I think that combination has allowed us to have a very good partnership, even though I'd say it's not perfect. Other question that Irv asked was talking about operational duties and how we kind of split things up, and why something works well or doesn't work well. On the operation side, as you could probably imagine, I'm the outside guy, he's the inside guy. And talking about that when there's a 50-50 partnership is very important, because as Peter mentioned, there isn't the person at the top that kind of directs things. So having clear expectations around who's going to do what has been incredibly helpful. There have been times where we cross over. So for example, he's been dealing, I'm more like you, Jenny, I don't have a problem with, conflict is not a bad word for me. I don't think it's great. For him, he is that way. He doesn't like conflict. So he was about to negotiate something with a vendor that's more on in his turf. And I said, you want me to handle that? He's like, would you? It's like, yeah, I have no problem having those tough conversations where he doesn't. So those types of cases it's great to be able to kind of point that out and be able to say, no, it's something that's easy for me, it's hard for you, we should kind of optimize. There are times where those differences, for example, I remember when we first got started, he said, okay, let's do a to-do list. You do yours, I do mine, and then we'll put them together and prioritize. And we did that, and I said, okay, what's the first thing on your to-do list? And he said, well, back in the 70s, there was these competitors that went out of business and they blew up. We should kind of figure that out. 70. So, you know what's the first thing on my to-do list? Get a phone. We can't call anybody right now. And realizing post-marriage counseling that it's like, oh, okay, he's this way. That's been really helpful. There was times where framing it in that context is valuable. So there was a time where he said, we spoke to this attorney and he gave us the answer. He's like, we should call another attorney. And so we had to raise capital. And I was living on my little sister's futon in her studio apartment. I was like, spend another $500 to get somebody else to say the exact same thing. But recognizing that there's is there more than $500 worth of value that is going to come to him to be able to get this? Because this is something that's a big sticky point for him. And saying, well, at least it's only $250 from me. So I say that, and some of it's tongue in cheek, but there's I don't want to trivialize the part. Like there can be frustrations sometimes, and as long as you recognize that and are able to talk through that has been really helpful. So some things that I'd say has not worked as well as because of that. So there's differences around. He likes more data. I use more intuition, and I think there's times to use both. There are things that I'm thinking very long term. He's sometimes thinking, what about this month? That is especially coming to consideration when you say, well, should you optimize things for equity value in the company or should you optimize things for cash flow? And the answer is not always one or the other. So it's always, I value his perspective. I think he values mine, hopefully. And then that dialogue has been really helpful.
Thank you very much. So panel, suppose I'm just about to go into business with my partner, and we've done all kinds of things short of going to the Catholic marriage counselor, but we've spent a lot of time together. There's really good goal alignment. My partner and I both have 6 or 7 years of business experience. My question is, should I check references on my partner? If so, how do I do it? If not, why not?
Definitely. We went on a weekend getaway with his now wife and my then girlfriend down to LA, and we spent time together. I had very close friends of mine come and kind of talk to him. I spoke to people that he had worked with in the past, and if there were ever any type of kind of watch outs, and we both messaged it to the people that the other person was calling and tell them everything, because it's not for a job that I'm trying to get and hide the bad stuff. I would much rather figure this out before we partner up, because I think your analogy of getting pregnant and you're getting stuck, and it's tough because in the moment you want to start the business, right? You are in the mindset of you have this confirmation bias, I want to make this work, and you could be blind to certain things. So having the outside and hearing other voices was very helpful for us.
So in my observation, very few people check references on their would-be partners. Very few people do. They feel they know them so well that they don't bother looking into the last 8 or 10 years of their partner's life. And with their partner's blessing and permission and with reciprocity, good thing to do. My last question before we open it up is, do you think we should have a partnership agreement including a dissolution process or not?
I didn't, you should.
And it's just good to think through those things that could go wrong. Lots of things that go wrong. Both it services things to talk about and agree on, but also if you can put a framework in place, whether it's a legal agreement or just an agreement for how you're going to do it, it will solve some of the problems that that come up going forward. It's awkward to do. I didn't do it. We thought about it. We talked about it. We didn't do it because it was just, there was other stuff happening and it was just a little awkward, and who wanted to talk about that stuff? And it worked out. I was fortunate to have advisors who helped ours work out, but it could have been time-consuming and ugly at the time. It's really, I think, a smart thing to do.
I would agree with that. And the other thing that happened when in my partnership agreement with Jessica was the idea of vesting, which was very interesting for me because our investor said, well, of course you guys will vest. And we said, no, it's our idea. We own. We're 50-50. And he was like, but you haven't created it yet. And he said, how would you feel if Jessica left tomorrow? Would you want her to have 50% of the, or, you know, the numbers change after the investors, but would you want her to have 50% of the company? Do you think that's fair? I was like, right, no. And the idea of vesting was something that came out in the partnership agreement, and it turned out to be really good because everyone was aligned, and you were aware that the idea is nice and all, but really it's in the execution of creating the company.
Another big issue that you want to address in partnership agreements, and they're generally a good thing to do, I think, is how much of the vested stock a departing partner gets to keep, as opposed to how much she or he needs to sell back at the then fair value. Big difference between recapturing that stock at fair value then and giving them that option to keep it for some longer period or perhaps indefinitely.
Herb, did you say how much of vested?
Yeah, if it's already vested, how much of it do you get to keep after that versus have to sell back when you leave? Be glad to have your questions. Well, we're done, I guess. Goodbye. Green?
I feel like I've only been here for now, so maybe this is going to be a little awkward.
All right, I'll partner with you.
No, I am very much in a kind of a monogamous relationship with my company, and you know, part of it is, and Mac, I kind of want to direct this at you, because you sort of flew solo for a while. How do you know when you should find a partner? And I don't mean just in terms of the success of the company, but or actually, let me back it up a little bit. If I know kind of what I'm good at in the company, right? But I don't have a business degree. And so if I don't know what I need, how do I know what to look for in a partner? That's part of it. If you're developing a product that's not in the phase where it's ready to be sold yet, right? You're still kind of building the thing in the creative process. How do you know when to find the partner? And then the third, and hopefully this isn't germane to the relationship thing, although I don't know. How do you pay them without funding?
Well, I think the first question is how do you find the right partner if you don't know what you need? And I think advisors is a sort of a cop-out answer, but also an important answer. You know, I can't answer the question, what could I have done to make our company grow faster or be more profitable? And one of the things I think I've done poorly is I don't have a formal board of advisors. And I think if I did have a formal board of advisors where I'm actually compensating the right people to be advisors, they could help me see places that I might be missing things. And I think that's the place that you're in. If you're not sure what you need to take your business to the next level, getting an outsider's perspective would probably be really valuable. In your case, it might be people who know you well. It could be your mom, I don't know, but it could be people that say, look, you're good at these things, you're not good at this. You're good at running a business, but you don't pay attention to the numbers, so get someone who's strong in finance. So I think that might be the best way to find someone.
In your experience, when you were building the company in the beginning, was there a phase where you said, all right, I have to build this on my own first? Like, I could go out and find someone, but it's not really worth it. I need to build it, and then at some point, and I don't mean in terms of growing the company, I mean in terms of like establishing it first a little bit.
I started selling artificial Christmas trees online, and I started in August, and I didn't have a lot of time to sell Christmas trees, and so I just did everything very quickly, and it went really well, and then I said, okay, the rocket took off, I have no mission control, I have no team, and I basically started over and then focused on the team and our culture. And so that, for me, it was very clear, and I also had a break point because people don't buy artificial Christmas trees in February. So, that was kind of unique to my situation. I think, everybody's situation is different. And what's interesting to me, honestly, the most interesting thing you've said is that you're building your business, you feel like you need a partner. And I don't know if you mean bring on a 50-50 partner or make the next strategic hire, but I think those two things are very different. And making the next strategic hire is going to depend on your funding situation and what you need next and when can you find the right person. But I think some of these same principles, anytime you're making a key hire, I think it's very important, all these things people have said. Maybe you don't go quite as far as marriage counseling, but they're all super important. And all the key hires I've made, I've worked with before. First employee, I stole from a vendor. Don't do that, but it worked out well because I had worked with them for 6 months. Second employee was a classmate that I had worked with, and the third employee was someone that I had known for a long time and had a chance to work with. So all these things I think are still important to that decision.
So following up on that question and deciding when to bring a co-founder that's not an equal partner or a strategic hire, what I'm struggling with, I have an idea and I'm really passionate about this idea, and I'm not sure that I could, but at the same time I need somebody with technical expertise in a specific area. And I'm not sure that I can find a person with the requisite skills who will be as passionate about the same cause. So what advice would you give me? Do I really focus on a strategic hire, or is it better to bring a co-founder that might not be a 50-50 partner?
I would say if you're looking at bringing someone in that's not as passionate about the idea, then I would hire them if they're the right person for that role, but I would not want a co-founder of any percentage doesn't share the same values and passion that I have. I don't know what you would say.
Passion in both.
I would think either one should be early in a company, off the charts in enthusiasm for what you're doing.
And I go back to, it sounds like that's the compatible skill set, but maybe not the compatible person. And the skill set you can always hire, or no matter how you end up compensating them. So I think first and foremost is finding your compatible partner. If they happen to have the technical skills you need, I think that's excellent.
Charlie?
I'm actually facing the other side of that, which I've met someone who's just as passionate about the idea that I've brought to her. She has a bunch of connections, and she wants to be a co-founder. She wants to be a partner, but I have a lot of hesitation entering into marriage with her. And I just think being honest with myself, there might be times where she's able to bring a lot to the table, which is great, but I don't know that I want to be in that partnership. Have any of you kind of interviewed people who said you'd be a great, person on the first team when it hits like 10 people, but I don't want to hit a partnership with you, and had those conversations?
I have not, but I would say to trust your gut. And if you're seeing it now, you're going to see it in spades in the future. So, because if anything, it works the reverse. Someone looks all shiny and new, and once you get in, you realize some things, which is why checking references is so key. So I would say you're probably right on, and so maybe finding out how you could work with this person. Maybe there's a small equity stake, and you say, I want you to do this part, or maybe you have find someone else with the skill set. But I would say you definitely cannot enter into a partnership, being that given where your gut is today.
I would take it further and say, beware the shiny penny, who has, great connections and can solve a bunch of your problems, but there's an interpersonal piece that doesn't feel right. I would guess this person might not be a good senior employee either, and a way to test it would be to maybe engage in a project that did not involve equity compensation for her, and just work with her and go a little further with the relationship, maybe check references and do the things you would. But if there's something here, I agree that it's likely to be bigger than you realize yet.
Yeah, I think you already have your answer, and I think that from other entrepreneurs I know and some I've invested in, I hear things like this. I found this person, they have these great connections, I don't think they're quite the right, and most of the time people don't work with them, and 6 months later even, if not a year later, they don't even remember that person. So I don't mean to dismiss this person, but my guess is you'll find other people that add the same value that would be a better fit in the future.
Thanks.
Yes.
So if you start with the premise that you found the right partner, and you've got compatible values, and you want to take the business to the same place, inevitably you're still going to have conflict, right? You talked about it too. And so one way that you could possibly get around that is to not be 50-50 partners, and whatever that split might be. Does that have the company make decisions faster, or does that create more problems?
I mean, I have a feeling we may have different points of view on this, but my answer on that would be it really depends on the personalities of the people. I think there's beauty in conflict, and the 50-50 means you're equally vested in this being successful. And conflict to me is often, if it plays out correctly and there's good communication skills, gets you to a higher place. However, the downside is no one gets to make that final call, and that does make things easier. So I'll let someone else speak to that, but I would say I really think it depends on how you want it structured and the personality of the people. And if there's someone who's a real control freak and at the end of the day can't deal with the 50-50, you probably are better off in a sort of not having it be 50-50.
Yeah, the issues that are going to come up for why you don't agree are probably going to be the same whether you're 50-50 or 52-48 or equity and just a key person in the company. It's more about how much you work with them. I think it does change the relationship when there is someone who's majority and minority, and I think that there are just situations where that's more appropriate. And so it really depends on the situation. It's not so much the person, but if there are just ways that I think that whole process of coming to agreement is necessary for the most part anyway when the person is really important and senior in the company. You're not just, if you're an evolved person and you can't just run over great people around you and tell them what to do. It just doesn't work that way in the long run. The more you know about yourself and the ways that you fall into traps in personal relationships, the better off you'll be in your life, but also in your business. But I do think there are cases where it makes more sense and it just fits better for there to be a minority and majority partner, and it is different.
Actually, just to build on that, I think it's more about expectations of, is someone here forgetting what the equity split is someone here going to be sort of the CEO and make the final call after that conflict arises? And I also retract that control freak because I think there are great leaders who just at the end of the day want to be the ones to make that call. So I think it is more about expectation setting probably than equity split, to your point.
When the respective contributions of the partners over time don't match the ownership percentages, there's enormous friction that is grown out of resentment. And oftentimes partnership percentages have to be adjusted either to 50-50 or away from 50-50 to match the perceived contributions of the parties, which of course are not always in alignment. We just taught a case last week. A GSB man has a partner who did not go here, and there's a difference in ownership percentage of their co-founders. And the students at some length questioned them about how they arrived at that, and are they comfortable with that, and at least for consumption in class, the person with the lesser percentage said, I recognize what he brought to the picture. He was able to raise the capital I never could have raised. He did this, that, and the other thing. And yes, I made these contributions, but you can't spend percentages. We have a successful company. Our relationship is good, and I'm happy in this non-50-50 relationship. So it doesn't have, there's no one template that you have to apply to a partnership. Yes?
If you assume that you are going to build a partnership agreement and you would recommend it, I can imagine there are a lot of different scenarios that you could try to think through ahead of time for your prenup, if you will. How complex do you try to get, or do you just cover a couple of the big key, like what happens if you want to walk away? How in-depth do you try to get when you work through all that up front?
I think a good lawyer or a good mentor can work through that pretty easily. But a good lawyer has seen a bunch of it before and can sort of can walk you through that. You'll decide that with your partner in 5 minutes. I would say more detail than you're comfortable with, but it doesn't need to be Yeah, but you can, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important not to be doing this for the first time, to get somebody who's done it 50 times for clients.
And not just because my husband's a lawyer, but I think that that is really important. And I think even when you're sleeping on your sister's futon, spending the money for a lawyer is the smartest money you will ever spend in the beginning. And I think a lot of people say, well, I can do it, and I found the form online. And it's shocking how much these people they've seen it all, and they can really take good care of you.
Have you then on this dissolution agreement, I mean, that's something that I had considered as well, but I've never actually heard of it, as a separate prenuptial, if you will, right, for entrepreneurship. Are there lawyers that have the expertise, the 50 times that have done this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. No question.
And not only will they have the form, and it's almost boilerplate to start with, but then you can sort of say, well, this is sticky for us because of our situation. What have you seen? And if they're good, they'll sort of describe it, and you have a couple choices, and you guys go, what do you think is fair? And you move on. And the key is not to get hung up on this for 3 weeks and fight about it. And I don't think a prenuptial is a good analogy because, you go into a marriage expecting for it never to end. You go into a business partnership knowing at some point it will end, right? It may be when you're 70, but at some point it's going to end. And so you should think about that, plan for it. Prenuptial, it's, a little different.
Fraser.
Does the financial divide, so the way the equity works, does it have to go the same as the way your control of the company, or are there mechanisms you can use to give yourselves equal control and yet split the proceeds, the financial rewards at the end separately? Because I could see situations where one party had put more in perhaps of their own wealth or something, and yet they didn't want. You don't want a situation where they have control of every single decision. Have you ever heard of that?
So I guess I'll answer with my understanding is there's sort of different ways that you get your equity. And so if you both are planning to work full-time on this and you split up your equity, and that's where I really recommend investing because it's all about the sweat that you put into it that makes it successful. And then capital is a completely different category, and that buys you a different kind of equity. So there's a common stock or preferred stock. And then you talk about different ways of divvying up control and which group votes with what. And once again, I point back to the lawyer will set you straight a lot better than I will on this panel of how that works out. I don't know if anyone.
Yeah, the short answer is yes.
Right.
Hilla?
I shouldn't say.
No, I didn't
Sorry.
I like his
You're not
answer
making
better.
it all over the place.
You mentioned adjusting equity stakes later on. How difficult a person is?
Well, it's sticky because oftentimes the respective perceptions are different. Oh, yes, I am pulling my weight. Oh, no, you're not. And that's hard. But if one party, the party who feels that he or she is pulling more of the weight, said, I can't go on this way, that sometimes can cause the logjam to break and for them to take a fresh look at the respective contributions. So I've only seen a few cases of that, but I have seen a few of them.
Have you seen more where it's just falling apart and gotten really ugly?
Absolutely.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. Thomas, you had a question?
No, it's scratching my head.
Okay. No, boy. Hi, Joria.
We're thinking about expanding what we're doing in different regions by partnering with people in areas that we're not ourselves. And I'm just, in listening to you guys, trying to think if I should be thinking about that as partners, or if I should be thinking about that more like hires if I incentivize them in some partnership structure. I don't know if you guys have experience in how you grew your own businesses, but I'm kind of thinking maybe I should think about hiring, even if it has a partnership look.
I think you can call it partnership.
Right.
Just like, Walmart probably calls all its employees partners or something. But that's really tough, right? Not to kill the marriage analogy, but how many people do you want to be married? So I think it's just really hard to do that. But that's my take.
I would agree.
Sounds like franchising is almost more. Again, I don't know what your business is, but having someone who's invested in the business and cares about it and shares the same values. But if something doesn't work out, both of you have they might get something out of it if they leave, but you also can take it back if you need to.
I would go back to the expectations. So whatever you call it and exactly how you structure it, there are probably a range of ways to do it, but the importance is aligning expectations very clearly. I know people who have vendors or customers who are like partners because they've been selling to them for 20 years, and they have dinner when they go visit them in England, and they're very, very close, but it's a relationship, and that's, you'd almost call that a partnership, but they're really customer and vendor.
Do partners need to be in the same financial situation? So you mentioned the example with the lawyer bill. Do you need to bring equal money to the table? Let's say before you raise a third-party capital, do you need to be able to bootstrap the company equally, or have you encountered those financial issues and how to deal with money?
Yeah, so MasterCard is still my master. Still paying off the credit card debt when we started, and my business partner is not in that same situation. And that's where the marriage analogy, I think, works as well. It's like you are not just working with this person, and what's happening in their personal lives doesn't affect things. It's very intertwined. This is why it's important to know that person's spouse and make sure that there is a alignment even in, does that spouse know what that person is getting into? So you can have different financial situations, but recognizing that those differences may come into play into the business, and that's what comes with that partnership.
If there's a skill set that you need, but it's not so critical that you want it to be a partnership.
A lot of what I'm reading from venture capitalists and other investors, they say that the most important thing they look for is the team. How do you build a team? So it almost seems like a paradox, right? Where you need the money to build a team that the investors are going to look at to get the money. So unless you're looking at really hiring hard, and you're like, I'm going to give you 30% or whatever it is, and it really is more the strategic hire thing. How do you go about doing that? And can I just throw one other thing in there? Have you ever seen examples of people where they hire someone to be their boss, and has that worked out well?
So I guess it's always interesting, right, getting all the parties to the table. I mean, we had a situation where we couldn't get investors unless we had retailers, but retailers weren't going to join us unless we had good backing. So to me, it's that common thing where you figure it out and you say, okay, assuming success to this partner or person you want on your team, if we get funding, I'd like you to take on this role, and perhaps they can join you for a little bit. And I think investors would understand that guy is theirs, assuming we're in. And so that's how you kind of get it, you hobble it together, from my experience. And I do have experience in both of my cases. I hired the CEO, I hired my manager, and it has worked out incredibly well both times. And once again, it's expectations. It's understanding what you want from someone. First of all, I think first and foremost, understanding that you don't want that job and why you don't want it and what you're looking for in somebody and finding the right person. And I have not had issues in either cases.
Last question?
When it comes to vesting, you've mentioned, Jenny, with the vesting, to make sure you and your partner have it. Did you just do that on a timeline, or did you do it based on performance? And did you consider doing it sort of on, once you've met a certain goal, you'd be allowed to vest a certain amount, and your partner, when she met goals, she could do it?
We did it purely on time.
Okay.
And we were really honest with each other, and we said, if you're not pulling your weight, then we want to have an organization that the bar is really high, and that if I'm not pulling my weight, I don't get to be a part of it. And so it was sort of an assumption that weight would be pulled, and therefore it was just kept on the timeline. I think it would be really hard because those milestones change a lot. Like, you think that's your business. Oh, no, that's your business. And so I can't imagine at a startup having your vesting tied into milestones, but I'm sure it's appropriate somewhere or in some business.
I like doing it that way. I mean, it depends on the business. I think
Right.
You're right. If you can be really clear about it. I'd never thought about having different milestones for different partners for that piece of it, but and I wouldn't favor that. I would say it depends on how clear you could make those milestones. If they were very clear, then maybe you could have different milestones, but that strikes me as a bad idea, and the better one would be to have very common, very simple milestones that both of you vest on, and so you're working together and everybody's aligned with you. I mean, goal alignment, of course, is critical as you build a team.
Thank you all for coming, and panel, thanks for a great job.
We have dinner upstairs. I'm hungry because I didn't eat a snack. Probably upstairs. We're going to be upstairs in the CES. I have to admit, I have not seen the setup. I'm hoping we're all going to fit in the main area. If not, we have two conference rooms we may use. We have a few guests joining us. Rob Chess, who's doing one of the advisory sessions tomorrow. John Glenn, who just retired from the GSB. And we're thrilled to have him back. Chuck Holloway, who is some of you know, he's been a faculty member at the GSB for 40-some years, officially retired, but he's been recalled like the Toyotas. Joel Peterson, who I pulled his bio for this. I had the last one. He's been recalled. He actually never really went away, which we're very thankful for. Joel Peterson teaches some of our classes, managing growing enterprises. He's also very involved with the Leadership Institute, or the Center for Leadership. Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you. Dennis Rohan, who teaches our business plan class 356. He's going to be doing a session tomorrow on elements of the pitch. Mark Zitter's also coming up for dinner, and then Russ Siegelman, who's going to be doing the session tonight. So drink some caffeine because we are coming back here at 7:30 for one more hour. So we're straight upstairs. For those of you who are from the GSB, maybe you can take your non-GSB friends by the hand and lead them up to the CES. So thank you. Linda, a last question. Yes, coming back here. Everything's in here.